It shows up before you even realize you're awake, before the alarm has fully registered, before your eyes have adjusted to the light, before you have made a single conscious decision about who you are going to be today. It is already there, already talking, already running its very familiar, very well-rehearsed, completely uninvited commentary on your life, your chances, your capabilities, and the specific situation you are about to walk into. It does not knock. It does not ask permission. It has been living in your head long enough that it stopped bothering with pleasantries years ago. It just opens its mouth and starts, with the casual confidence of something that has never once been seriously challenged, and says the thing it always says. Give up. Or maybe yours sounds slightly different. Maybe yours says run. Maybe it says you cannot do this. Not really. Not when it actually counts. Maybe it says you are going to fail and everyone is going to see it, and you already know this is not going to work, so why are you still pretending it might? Maybe it is more specific than that. Maybe it knows your exact weak points with the precision of something that has been studying you your entire life, which, to be fair, it has, because it is you, or at least it has convinced you that it is. Here is the problem. You have been listening to it. Not because you are weak, not because you lack intelligence or awareness or genuine desire for something better, but because nobody ever told you the most important thing about that voice, the thing that changes everything the moment you actually understand it. Nobody told you that the voice is not you, that it is not truth, that it is not prophecy or instinct or wisdom dressed up as caution, that it is, in the precise philosophical language of Epictetus, a judgment, a single, automatic, completely unchosen judgment that arrived in your mind before your rational faculty had a chance to weigh in, and then convinced you, through sheer speed and familiarity, that it deserved to be the final word. It is not the final word. It is the first word. And Epictetus, a man who had considerably more reason than most of us to let the first word win and considerably less patience for people who did, spent his entire philosophical life teaching one thing above almost everything else. The first word is never the final word unless you decide that it is. Today we are going to go to war with that voice. Not the comfortable kind of war where you read something inspiring and feel briefly better, and then go back to listening to it an hour later because the feeling faded. The real kind. The kind with actual weapons and an actual strategy and a philosophical framework so precise and so tested that 2,000 years after Epictetus built it, it is still the sharpest tool available to any human being who is serious about taking their own mind back. Let us begin. Epictetus opened his most important work, the Enchiridion, which is a Greek word that means handbook, with a line so direct it almost feels rude in the way that only completely true things can feel rude. He said, "Some things are in our control and others are not." Full stop. No preamble, no gentle easing into the idea. Just the most important distinction in the entire landscape of human psychology. Delivered like a man who does not have time for your resistance to it because he already knows you need it too badly to spend the first 20 minutes arguing about whether it is true. The first voice is not in your control. This is the thing most people get catastrophically wrong about it. They think that because the voice is inside their head, because it arrives in something that sounds disturbingly like their own internal voice, that they are responsible for its existence and therefore obligated to believe its content. They think that because they cannot stop it from showing up, they cannot stop it from mattering. Epictetus would find this confusion both understandable and completely unacceptable. He would say, with the specific patience of a man who had enormous compassion for human struggle and precisely zero tolerance for human excuse-making, that you did not choose the first voice any more than you chose the weather this morning. It arrived. Automatic. Unchosen. a product of your history, your wounds, your past experiences of failure and danger, and the specific moments where someone or something taught your nervous system that this kind of situation ends badly. The first voice is a reflex. And here is the crucial thing about reflexes that Epictetus understood long before neuroscience had the vocabulary to confirm it. You do not choose the reflex. You choose what you do after the reflex. That choice, the one that happens in the gap between the first voice arriving and you deciding what authority it actually has, is where your entire life is being determined. That gap is where Epictetus lived. That gap is what his entire philosophy was built to expand and defend and hand to you as the most valuable piece of real estate you will ever own. Let us talk about what the first voice actually is, because naming it properly is the first act of war against it. Epictetus taught that every experience you have is mediated by a judgment, not by the event itself, by what you decide the event means. The event is neutral in the sense that it carries no inherent instruction about how you should respond to it. The instruction comes from the judgment that attaches to the event the moment it arrives in your awareness. And the first voice is simply the first judgment, the automatic one, the one that gets there before you have applied any conscious reasoning to the situation. The first voice says give up, because somewhere in your history, giving up was the response that made sense. Maybe the last time you pushed through something this difficult, it did not work and the pain of that outcome got stored as a lesson. Maybe someone important to you gave up when things got hard, and you learned, quietly and without realizing it, that this is what people like you do in situations like this. Maybe your nervous system simply learned, through 1,000 small experiences of difficulty that preceded this one, that the safest response to this particular flavor of challenge is retreat. The first voice is not malicious. That is the thing. It is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to protect you based on a set of experiences that may be years or even decades out of date, using a strategy that may have made complete sense at one point in your life and has not been relevant since, but which has never been seriously updated because you never turned around to look at it directly and ask whether it still applied. It is the outdated protection of a nervous system that has not yet received the memo that you are not the person you were when the lesson was first learned. And here is where Epictetus hands you the weapon. He called it the faculty of choice, the prohairesis, the one capacity that no circumstance, no other person, no experience of failure or pain or devastation can ever reach without your explicit permission. The capacity to look at the first voice, the automatic judgment, the reflex of retreat, and say, I see you. I understand where you came from, and I am now going to choose something different. That choice is not available before the first voice arrives. The voice arrives whether you want it to or not. The choice becomes available in the moment after. And the moment after, however brief it feels, is entirely yours. Here, in this exact moment, I want to stop and talk to you directly. Not to the part of you that is watching this with academic interest, to the part that recognized the first voice in the opening 60 seconds of this video because it heard itself being described. If that is you, and I suspect it is more of you than are currently comfortable admitting, then this channel is your resource. Subscribe right now. Every week we bring you the exact philosophy that turns the volume down on the voice that has been too loud for too long. The Stoics, the existentialists, the thinkers who built frameworks for the human mind out of real suffering and real testing, left us everything we need. Subscribe now. Join a community of people who are done being governed by the automatic and are learning, deliberately and consistently, to choose something better. Now let us talk about the practice, because Epictetus was the least abstract philosopher who ever lived, and he would be furious if this conversation ended with inspiration rather than instruction. He taught his students a practice that is deceptively simple and genuinely transformative when applied with consistency. He called it the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before you agree with the first impression that arrives in your mind, of treating that impression, whatever it contains, as a proposal rather than a verdict, of asking, before you give it the authority of your agreement, whether it is actually true, actually useful, actually in your interest to accept as the basis for your next action. The first voice says, give up. The discipline of assent says, hold on. Let me look at this before I sign it. Is it actually true that I cannot do this? Is it actually true that I am going to fail? Is it actually true that the right response to this specific difficulty in this specific moment is retreat? Or is this an old judgment running on old data, producing an old response to a situation that deserves something newer and more accurate? This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the most demanding things a human being can practice consistently, because the first voice does not feel like a proposal. It feels like a fact. It feels like the most obvious and most honest assessment of the situation available, which is precisely the disguise it has always worn and precisely why it has been so successful at getting your agreement for so long without ever having to earn it. The discipline of assent is the practice of removing that disguise, of seeing the voice for what it actually is, an impression. One impression among many possible impressions of a situation that has not yet been fully examined, and then, having seen it clearly, making the active, conscious, deliberate choice about whether to agree with it or to produce a different judgment, one that serves you better, one that is more accurate, one that reflects not the old data of who you were when the lesson was first learned, but the current reality of who you actually are right now. Let us talk about what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control one more time, because it applies to the first voice with a precision that should be immediately useful to you. The first voice arriving is not in your control, completely outside it. You cannot prevent the reflex. You cannot stop the automatic judgment from forming. Trying to do so is not discipline, it is suppression. And suppression does not kill the voice. It drives it underground where it becomes more influential, not less, operating below the level where you can see it and challenge it. What is entirely in your control is the response, the assessment of the voice once it has arrived, the choice about whether to hand it the authority it is demanding or to examine its credentials before deciding what role, if any, it gets to play in what you do next. This distinction is liberating in a way that nothing else quite manages to be, because it stops the war against the wrong enemy. You are not trying to become a person who never hears the first voice. That person does not exist. Epictetus heard the first voice. Marcus Aurelius heard it, which is half of what he was writing about in his private journals, the internal negotiation between the voice of retreat and the voice of duty. Every human being who has ever done something difficult heard the voice first, and then chose to do the thing anyway. That is the whole secret, not the absence of the voice, the presence of the choice that follows it. Let us go one level deeper, because there is something about the first voice that Epictetus understood that most modern conversations about mindset completely miss, and that is the role of training. He ran a school, he taught students, and he did not teach them to feel better about the first voice, or to develop a more compassionate relationship with it, or to understand its origins so they could hold it with curiosity rather than judgment. He trained them, deliberately, repeatedly, under conditions of increasing difficulty, to practice the discipline of assent until it became faster and more automatic than the first voice itself. He understood that in the actual moment of hardship, in the moment when the voice arrives with its full force and its complete conviction, you do not have the luxury of a long philosophical deliberation. The moment is moving. The situation is real. The pressure is genuine. And if the discipline of assent has not been practiced until it is a reflex in its own right, The first voice will always win by default, simply because it got there first. This is why the Stoics trained daily, not because they enjoyed the discipline for its own sake, because they understood that the moment of crisis is not the moment to learn the skill. The moment of crisis is the moment to use the skill you have already built. And the building happens in the ordinary moments, the ones that do not feel like training, the small daily decisions to examine the first judgment before agreeing with it, to choose the harder response when the easier one is available, to practice the discipline in the low-stakes situations so that it is available, fully formed and fully functional, when the stakes are as high as they get. Every time you examine the first voice in a small moment, you are building the capacity to examine it in a large one. Every time you choose your response rather than accepting the reflex, you are expanding the gap between stimulus and choice. Every time you look at the voice and say, "I see you, but I am not ready to agree with you yet," you are performing an act of Stoic training that Epictetus would recognize immediately and approve of completely. That is the practice. That is the war. Not dramatic, not sudden, incremental, daily, practiced in the ordinary moments and available, because of that practice, in the extraordinary ones. Let us bring this all the way home, because there is something that needs to be said clearly at the end of this conversation that the beginning of it was building toward. The first voice has been in charge for long enough, not because it is powerful. It is not particularly powerful on its own. It is fast, yes. It is familiar, absolutely. It is convincing in the way that anything repeated often enough and never seriously challenged becomes convincing through sheer repetition and accumulated authority. But power, in the Epictetan sense, does not belong to the voice that arrives first. It belongs to the faculty that decides what happens next. That faculty is yours. It has always been yours. The voice did not take it from you. It simply convinced you, through the same trick it has been running since the first time it showed up, that it was the only voice in the room, that agreeing with it was not a choice but an inevitability, that give up was not a proposal but a verdict. It was always a proposal, every single time, and you always had the authority to decline it. Epictetus declined it while enslaved, while in physical pain, while in circumstances that would have justified any first voice on any day. He declined it not because he felt no pull toward retreat, but because he had built, through consistent practice and genuine philosophical conviction, a governing faculty so robust and so reliable that the first voice never got to run the meeting unchallenged. You have everything you need to build that same faculty. Not the same circumstances, thankfully. The same tools, the same philosophy, the same gap between stimulus and response that belongs entirely to you the moment you decide to occupy it. The first voice will arrive tomorrow morning, before the alarm fully registers, before your eyes adjust to the light. Right on schedule, familiar as ever, with its opening line already prepared. Let it speak. Then look at it clearly, without flinching, without agreeing automatically, without handing it authority it has not earned. And then deliberately, consciously, with the full force of the only faculty that has ever actually belonged to you, choose something better. Epictetus did it in chains. You can do it in yours.